Okay, good morning, everyone. Well, I present on Bayesian approach in a common feature space. And during the talk, I try to make clear what is meant by that. But before I go into that, I show some slides of my research area, which is plant science. And after that, I will talk about Gaussian models, using Bayesian estimation as Gaussian models. Then talk about some dimension reduction technique, principal component analysis. Then I go into some dimension increasing techniques, meaning embedding some data into a higher dimensional feature space. And then I come to our approach, which is a combination of some dimension reduction and increasing step, Bayesian estimation in common feature space, and I end up with some examples and conclusion. While plant science, we are interested in understanding how plants interact in their environment, and the main feature we are interested in is growth. And this is driven by industry for farming and seed production, for examples, and they want to know what's the optimal condition for certain plant species to grow, or how can we change the plant that is more optimal for a certain condition. And we are using imaging for this. So we have a large amount of imaging techniques going from thermography to NMR, computer tomography, optical image processing, computer vision techniques. And the scope is to look into the plant in its natural environment, not disturbing the plant, and trying to find out how it works and how growth, for example, could be optimized. Here are also some techniques, so we are also using positron emission tomography, MIR, gas exchange, gas and water exchange experiments are performed. So there's a lot of data to analyze. Also, some portable MR devices are developed for field experiments, and also we have an NMR magnet in the greenhouse. Here, this is an example of a root measurement setup where some seeds are placed between a plexiglass plate and the roots grow down and are then filmed by a normal camera. We get an image sequence and compute then from this image sequence the optical flows or the velocity of this root, and then having this flow field compute the divergence as a measure of the growth. This is color coded, and then we can say, well, here in this red area there's the maximum growth of this root. And most of these experiments are done that the plants are fixed somehow, that they can better measure. But what we really want to do is to observe the plants without disturbing them. And this is a quite challenging task, because at the beginning the plant is quite thin, but then over time becomes more and more complex. And if you look at such a plant field, it's even for a human observer difficult to distinguish the leaves from different plants. And we have such video showing how plants moving, or the eye movement of plants is, so I can show this later on my laptop if someone is interested. And one approach, the current project is Robert Gardner, so we mounted some cameras onto a robotic arm. And the idea is to set up a cognitive system which learns how to grow up plants in some pre-specified ways, and also give water and nutrients. And here, in all stages of this system, it's important to incorporate prior knowledge. So, for example, we have first to find the different leaves and compute the leaf area, and therefore it's useful in this computer vision block to have some prior information, how looked plants usually, and use also information of the past. And there comes in where we use Bayesian estimation methods. So what we would like to have is, or what we are looking for is, we want to build up a prior with all the information we have, for example, the leaf shapes, and then compute the posterior as a prior for the next measurement step. And then if you would like to compress this information, we could use one of these well-known estimators, map estimator, the minimum mean squared estimator from the posterior PDF. And I like to use Gaussian models because of their simplicity, so we can write down prior likelihood and analytically compute the posterior PDF by simply linear algebra. And we could also learn some prior from training data by setting up a likelihood for the model parameters and then assign some prior for them and compute the model parameters of this Gaussian model. But there are some limitations of this approach. First, if we have this cause of the dimensionality, when you think about an high definition train, which is about 1 million pixel values to proceed, you cannot compute the covariance matrix anymore. And another point is if you have outliers, Gaussian does not represent your distribution very well, and multiple modes are also not so good modeled by Gaussian approach. Well, the first problem can be handled either by modifying the model, for example, using some Gaussian Markov field and designing some sparse precision matrix. Or one could try to reduce the dimensionality of the problem. For example, PCA, where one makes a coordinate change and looks for the principal components which most of the data lives. And well, in principle, it's a parameterized model which can be computed from the estimation of the covariance of the data, and then from the eigenspace of the covariance matrix, one can compute the new coordinates of a lower dimensional subspace. And then you can use the Gaussian model on the lower dimensional space. Well, the problem of a multiple mode distribution can be tackled in that we map our input space data onto a higher dimensional space with some embedding, hoping that in this high dimensional space the Gaussian model fits more the data. Then in this estimate in this high dimensional space the model parameters, the mean covariance, and get a Gaussian model in the feature space. And then we can pull back this probability density functions in the input space and get a general non-Gaussian distribution. Well, the problem with this is we have a simple model in the feature space, but again, the model is quite complicated in the input space, or might be quite complicated. And in order to avoid this, we propose the following: doing inference in the feature space by the Gaussian model, then project the result, for example, as a map estimator back on the submanifold, which is defined by the embedding of the data, and then finally invert the embedding to get the entity we would like to have in the input space. This is exemplified by a simple example. Here we have a one-dimensional data set, which is a mixture of Gaussians with two different mean and the same variance. And as embedding, we use a parabola map in the two-dimensional space, so the green points are mapped onto this parabola. Then we model this data by a two-dimensional Gaussian with the mean showing this black dot and the level sets showing the covariance, estimated covariance matrix. And then we could sample from this model, drawing samples from the Gaussian, projecting back them on the submanifold and invert the embedding. And doing this several times gives us the result of the right side. So the red line, dash line shows the mixture of Gaussian model, samples from them, and the black line shows the pullback probability from feature space, and the histogram shows the samples from the backward projection. So what can we say about the property of this approach? First, if we design a probability density function in the whole feature space as a Gaussian, this becomes also Gaussians on the submanifold defined by the embedded data up to a normalization constant. The projection step can be seen some type of marginalization, but I have not pinned it down completely what it is. But we can say more about an estimator, for example, the minimum squared estimator, and it's a Gaussian model, so it's also the map estimator. In the input space, by the pullback probability density function equals our approach doing the inference with the Gaussians in the feature space and vector propagation, which is easily seen. You can here see the definition of the minimum mean square error estimator. If we multiply this type, multiply this norm out, we get here norm and here scalar product. And at this integral, in this integral we push forward the probability density onto the feature space, and you see that this is exactly the minimum mean square error estimator in the feature space of the feature vector. This can then be summed up again into this form, and this is exactly the minimum mean square projection of the estimator onto the submanifold. So this dimension increasing might have the problem that we are again in a very high dimensional space, or even in an infinite dimensional space, where we cannot do this inference. And in order to cope with this, we have used the idea of kernel PCA, where the scatter matrix is replaced by the gradient matrix, so the kernel matrix, simply by exchanging the transpose side, making then a very high dimensional scatter matrix to a matrix which is as the size of the number of training data points. And then, if you look at this matrix, this is then the entries of this matrix are the scalar product of these vectors. Meaning, and then in the next step, we apply the kernel trick by computing the scalar products in the feature space by a scalar product in the input space. And it has been shown that the eigenvectors of the scatter matrix, so the principal components we are looking for, can be computed from the kernel matrix. So the eigenvalues are the same, and the eigenvectors are a linear combination of the training data feature vectors. And with this eigenvectors, we can build up a lower dimensional principal subspace in the feature space on which we then again model a Gaussian distribution. And the coordinates of a new feature vector B is given by a projection of this feature vector onto the principal component. And we also did this for a likelihood model, also simply a Gaussian approach. And the parameters of this likelihood model are learned from training data. So we consider the training data as noise-free and corrupted them by noise. Embed them both in the feature space and take the difference as the error for computing or estimating the covariance matrix, shown here on the left for a 21-dimensional subspace. And here on the right you see the diagonal elements, which shows clearly how the different components are corrupted by uniform noise in the input space. So then we applied the map estimator, or minimum mean square estimator, which can be conveniently computed by linear algebra operations. And this A is the projected observation on this submanifold in the feature space, and B is then our estimate. And on the left, lower, you see this matrix, which transforms the measurements to the estimate. And you see, here's a 1, it goes to 1. You see that the components of the principal components are damped by this operation. And the principal is nothing else than a Wiener filter, but instead of frequencies which are damped, in this case, the principal components are damped. So I show 2 examples. The left side is a classical Kernel PCR approach for image denoising. So the model is learned with the ground truth. And then the denoising is performed by embedding the input data and projecting simply on this 9-dimensional subspace. And on the right side, you see the results of the Bayesian estimation approach, where the components are also damped according to the relation between the variance of the prior and the variance of the noise. The second example shows a classification problem where we have learned prior from 3 different sources and then draw samples from the left upper source, and shows the first, the fourth, and the fifth set example, which in all cases the classical Kernel PCR fails, but in the Bayesian approach updates the prior information from the posterior, and up to the fourth it founds the correct class of the problem. So what are the difference? From the Bayesian model allows us to design a generic probabilistic model, which we can also draw samples from. We can model uncertainties in the measurement process, and the subspace is learned from the training data. And update and refinement of the models can be done at low computational cost. So if the subspace is set up, subspace scale is cubic, subspace generation with Kernel PCR is cubic, and also for our approach. But as far as this subspace is set up, the model parameters can be refined. This shows some refinement of the norm of the precision matrix with 10,000 data points, and which is impossible for neural Kernel PCR. So, last slide. Outlook. Well, so far parameters of the embedding are set by cross-validation. It would be nice also to include this in some learning or Bayesian estimation step, and we're also examining other embedding techniques and learning the embedding mapping itself would be a nice thing. And full Bayesian approach is also investigated. So marginalization over the Gaussian model parameters would then result in a t-distribution. This concludes my talk. Thank you very much.
Questions?
I'm quite impressed by how many techniques you analyzed was planned. But okay. When you map into the higher dimensional space, then you sample from your Gaussian because that's convenient, easy to do, and then you project back into the subspace. Which measure do you apply to know in which direction you have to project? Just minimum distance, because the space can be very ugly.
Yes, I use simply minimum distance, so I use the flat metric in the feature space. So this is, the idea is that in the feature space, curved spaces are more linearized in some sense, but there's no proof of that. But experiments show that linear approximation works quite well. This is also the main idea of this kernel PCA, that one can model curved space in a higher dimensional by linear relations.
Advances in plant science involve a lot of vitamin-packed gore.
Just for clarification, you attacked the classification problem via a mixture of normal distribution. That's it. You applied a mixture of Gaussian. Yeah. Well, if I understood you, you made a kind of important sampling from just a normal multivariate distribution and quantifying the corresponding posterior densities. I wondered how long it takes to convert the simulation, since the convergence rate seems very slow. Or didn't you have problems with that?
What do you mean with convergence rate?
The Monte Carlo convergence rate.
Well, there's no Monte Carlo approach. We sample directly from a Gaussian and then project this Gaussians to the submanifold, which is defined by the embedding of the input space. And then there comes an approximation step, because the inversion of the embedding is in most cases not possible. And there are efficient algorithms available from kernel PCA to approximate the inverse embedding. So there's no Monte Carlo simulation to converge. So we directly sample the Gaussian, and then the next steps are only projections and inversions.
Yeah, just curiosity, attacking the same point about the embedding in the larger feature space and coming back. If you're taking Gaussian samples in the feature space and then bringing them back, do you have a weighting problem with the nonlinear embedding? Because there'll be different magnification ratios in different places. Is that a problem? Sometimes you'll be taking a large chunk of feature space into a small area of the input space. And that could make your results look spiky, look wrong in that place. Just wondering if you've got a problem or not.
I have not seen this in our experiments, but it's not really fully, I do not fully understand the whole thing, so it's only first attempt, so that's all I know.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank the speakers for sticking to the schedule, not that I really